Hello guys, welcome to the video. In this one, I want to talk about basics of C#. I'm going to explain something very simple and I'm going to give you a simple example on how you can make custom component do something to the game object. Before we begin though, I should say that programming is it's a huge topic, and I think it never helps if you dump a bunch of information on the beginner in the first video. I could give you a long lecture of maybe 2 hours length with all basics of the programming, but I think it's useless because you truly understand something only when you use it. So my approach is a little bit different. I'm going to explain some basics, but after that I'm going to explain things when we need them. As example, if it's time to rotate the tower in the game, then I'm going to explain how rotation works. If it's time to create a game object inside of a game, like a bullet or enemy or something like that, then I'm going to explain how to do that in that moment, all right? I'm going to try to introduce things slowly. The learning curve is going to be pretty easy and you're going to learn a lot, all right? Now, let's do something simple here. To make this script work, even though we don't have any code in it yet, but still, to make it work, we need to put it on the game object. So I'm going to create something simple, maybe a cube again, and let's give this cube a rigid body. And let's do freeze position on the X, Y, and Z, okay? And I'm going to put player script on it. Now let's cover this and let's go to the player script. Now over here, first what you see is a start and update. You should know that these two methods, and you can call them method, you can call them function, there's no really a difference. So these two methods are part of Unity's lifecycle. Start is called before the first frame, it is called only once, and usually if you need to do something once, maybe set up default values, or do some check just for once before you start the game, you can do it in the start. If you need to do something all the time, maybe you want to move the object, maybe you want to search for closest enemy, or simply you want to check if somebody presses the button, I mean the player presses the buttons during the game, you can do it in the update. Just to understand it better, let's try to type something here. I'm gonna type debug log, and this one gonna say start was called, and then in the update I'm gonna do debug log update is called. Okay, then we're gonna save it and we're gonna go to Unity. Back in Unity we need to go to play mode and make sure you have a player script on the game object, or otherwise it will not work. Then in the play mode, if we go to console, we can see that start was called, it was done only once, and then update is called all the time, even now. So as I said before, you can use start to do something once, and you can use update to do something all the time. Now let's stop the play mode, and let's go back to script. Now that we know a little bit about start and update, let's talk about variables. So variable can store a certain data type with a name you give it. There are different data types, but in this video we're going to talk about 4 basic one, and also I'm going to introduce you a couple of variables that we have from Unity. Okay, let's type this public float, and let's give it a name of something like maybe bullet speed, for example. Then let's type public int, and let's name it as something like coins that you earned. There is also a public bool, and for this one we're gonna give a name of something like is angry. Yeah, and last one we need to type here is public string player name, just like that. Now let's go back to Unity. And you can see 4 variables, and some of them look different. So variable of a bullet speed having data type float, right? It is a float, and float usually means you can store number with a decimal, and this one allows you to have values for speed, maybe for the score, for timer, for different things. And because the type of this value is float, you can have number with decimals over here. You can see it's 1.2, 2.3, and so on. The next value we have here is integer. it is named as coins. And because it is an integer, it can be only the whole number without decimals. If you change the value over here, you can see there is no dot, there is no decimal value. This one usually used for things like coins, maybe amount of enemies in the game, or anything that you cannot divide, because you cannot divide coins, right? You cannot have 4.5 coins. You either can have 4 coins or 5 coins. Simple as that. The next variable we have here is bool. The boolean value can be true or false. Usually it is used for different checks or for saving the state of the object, for example. In this case, we're saying if object is angry or not, and we can check it as true, false. Simple as that. And last one over here says string, and this one basically just like a text. You can type a text in here for player name or anything else. So these are the 4 simple types that we're gonna use a lot, and we're gonna use more different types later on, and I'm gonna talk about them later on. As of now, let's not worry about it too much, okay? What I want to do here next is something different. I want to make a public float x position. So this is a public value. It has a float type, and the name is x position. And also I want to make public float z position. All right, only x and z. We're not gonna touch y. Now we're gonna go to the start method, and you should know that we always have access to the transform component of the object. So this is what we can do. We can type transform position equals to new vector 3. We're gonna give it x position. Then for the y over here, I'm gonna type 0. And for the z position, I'm gonna type z position. Now, for this line of code, whatever value I have stored in this variable gonna be used over here. Same for z over here. And I can change them in the inspector, and then this line of code will be used in the start once start method is called. Okay, let's try this. We're gonna go back to Unity. You can see position of the x is quite weird. Let's say it is minus 0.5 on the x, 0.75 on the y, and 0.7 on the z. So that's the starting position. And I want to change it. Let's say I want it to be 5 on the x and 5 on the z. Before we try it out, let's go to game window over here and check play unfocused, because I want to see things in the scene window only. Now let me zoom out a little bit, just like that. And let's go to play mode. And we can see at the start cube was moved to a new position. So this is a simple example of a custom component. And of course, components we're going to create gonna do much more than just moving objects from one place to another. But still, it is nice to know how it's all supposed to work. We're gonna use the update later on. Let's not worry about that right now. Something else I want to show you before we end this video is something very useful, and we're gonna use it a lot. So you can make a variable of a rigid body or box collider. Basically, you can get any component in the script. For example, let's type public rigid body, and let's give it name of RB. That stands for rigid body. Now, if you save it and go to inspector, you can see that new field appeared over here. It has a name of a RB, and it says none, which means it is empty. If you drag rigid body over here, then you're gonna fill this variable with the rigid body we have on the game object. And now, by typing RB anywhere in the code, I'll have access to this rigid body on this game object. And let's try that. We have constraints over here. Let's uncheck them all. And if we go to the play mode right now, this cube is going to fall because constraints are not frozen. Now let's go back to script, and instead of this line of code, I want to type something different. For example, I'll type RB constraints. So we're getting access to the rigid body, then we're getting access to the constraints of rigid body over here. Then we're gonna type equals to, rigid body, constraints, freeze position. And this will freeze position on all of the 3 axes. Now let's save it and let's try this in the game. Gonna go to play mode. And we can see we froze constraints on the rigid body through the code without touching anything. Yeah, very cool, right? So this is another very simple example on how you can use a custom component, how you can use a script to do things to components on your game object. And this is how you make a game, basically. You just make it do different things when you need to. And I'm gonna show you that very soon, and we're gonna be making a very fun game. All right, I think that's enough for now, and I'll see you in the next video.